Hello, wonderful. This is Sarah. And if you have read my book, Becoming Toxic Person Proof, you probably remember the story I said about my grandmother's advice about bullies. And my son was in the car and he was talking about a bully at his school. And my grandmother said, "Oh, well, if you're getting bullied at school, you should probably be nicer to the bully. He probably doesn't have any friends. So if you're nicer to him, then he'll be nice to you." And you guys know I talk about that example if you followed me for any times because I went, "Oh my gosh, that's where it started. That set me up for a lifetime of problems." And it's something I want to address. And we are here with Candice Duggar, and that's exactly what she addresses, both in huge companies and corporations and HR and schools and homes and families and all of the above. How are you, Candice?
Oh, Sarah, thank you so much. I was over here trying to be so quiet while you were sharing that story
Yep.
because my story with my son started so much the same way. I don't think many of us know what to say. We
Mhm.
don't know how to respond when our kids or our spouses or our family or ourselves are dealing with bullying. We're not trained or even talked to appropriately in how to do it. And the advice your grandmother gave, I gave my son, who ended up putting his life in more danger. Right. So it just kind of, I was sitting here going, wow, how many other parents say that? Because
Mhm.
that's what we think. And the reality is, the research that has come out is that 38% of bullies are serious narcissists, have huge egos in themselves. They're actually overinflated egos. They don't feel bad about themselves, which is why they're doing it. And they're using it in a lot of different ways to climb social ladders, to get what they want. They use it as their power to take from others. And so when you're sitting there, I was thinking, oh gosh, as a mama, I said that because that's what I was told as a child, right?
Mhm.
That's what I
And I
was told.
want to zero in on something you said because you're exactly right. Narcissists and bullies, okay? And one of the things Candace and I want to talk about in this conversation, we get like emotional abuse and narcissism and personality disorders and this and that. And it's like, if we can narrow it down to bullies, you know, then we start to change the language around this, which I think you and I are both passionate about.
Right.
Because if it's like, we have to either say it's okay to bully people or it's not okay to bully people. So
Right.
if it's okay for your spouse to bully you, then it is okay for someone to bully your kindergartner. Like, of course, that's not. But when we kind of put that layer on it and recognize what's actually happening, it changes the conversation, right?
It does. It does. And so let's just, if it's okay, Sarah, let's take a moment and talk
Really?
about what is bullying. Because I have so many parents that come to me and go, my child's being bullied. And I'm like, maybe let's break it down. Maybe we're dealing with bullying. Maybe we're dealing with conflict. Maybe there's a communication issue. So when we talk about bullying, the easiest way I can explain it to people is a 3-step approach. And we call it ARP. Is it aggressive? Is it repeated? Is there a power imbalance? You have to have those 3 components. You can read all of the language and the big paragraphs of definitions, but really simply teaching our children, is the behavior aggressive? Is it repeated? And I should add a little caveat, or a strong probability of a threat within that, right? And is there a power imbalance? So when we have those 3 things, we're dealing with bullying. Bullying is not conflict. And in our lives, we have to be able to handle conflict. And I think something we could really do to help all of our children and ourselves is to be stronger at conflict resolution and understanding conflict skills, right? How do we handle it? But when we're dealing with bullying, we should never look at it as conflict, because it's not about conflict. When we're dealing with conflict, which could happen all the time, you and I might have conflict. We may disagree, but I'm not bullying you. We, at the end of the day, would both want to work towards a resolution, right? We might both be upset. At the end of it, we want to come together and have a relationship on it, and we're willing to give compromise one way or the other. Conflict wouldn't be ongoing all the time. It would be a situation that we'd be able to sit down and resolve. And when we sit and look at our culture, I want people to really think about this. We've become a culture that has just kind of exploded with bullying. People have stopped listening to each other. So our children don't know conflict resolution because many times as parents, we're name calling. We're talking bad about other people, right? We're seeing what kids are seeing. So is it aggressive? Is it repeated? Is there a power imbalance? And many times in bullying, what we see happen, like with your grandmother, right? It was be nice to them. Bully doesn't want you to be nice to them.
Mhm.
They're there to take your power, to overpower you, to make you feel bad. You can try to be friends with them all you want. It's not about that conflict. And so when we try to, as parents, as leaders, um, sit down with our kids and give them conflict resolution skills, we should never be doing that with bullies, because the bully's intent is not to resolve the conflict. You have to make sure you know what you're talking with, right? Are we dealing with conflict, or are we dealing with bullying? And when we're dealing with bullying, we need to be really careful, because our bullies can be extremely toxic in our lives. They can be really narcissistic. They want that power over us. They're using that in many ways to control and to manipulate. Many of our bullies in workplaces and relationships and in classrooms, they're actually manipulating people around them, and the teachers don't even know. So sometimes they're seen as the good kid, right? They're seen as the teacher's pet, and then behind their back, they're just not that person. And so it can be really difficult.
And I think Lundy Bancroft said there's a huge difference in a communication problem and a control problem. And I think that's such a simple way to say
Isn't
it.
it about the heart? It's
Yeah.
really about the heart and the intention. You know,
Yes.
it is, because our bullies, and I think that bullying behavior, a lot of people say, well, are they learning it at home? Possibly. I see a lot of kids who are struggling with bullying because it's experienced in their home sometimes, but many times they've learned these behaviors because there haven't been boundaries set for them in life. And they're allowed, people make excuses for them, and they use that power to keep climbing social ladders, to get what they want, to manipulate others. And they use a tendency form of bullying to, to really get what they want out of life. And they don't care who they step over to get there.
That's a really important point. And you said at the beginning that sometimes it's about an overinflated ego. Okay.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
there's this assumption that, especially in teachers and education, like, they just need extra love. They need extra attention, and they could need extra boundaries. They could need, in the book Character Disturbances by George Simon, he said, we assume everyone has low self-esteem. We don't assume people have too much self-esteem.
Right?
We
Right.
all need to find that balance. All
Mhm.
of
We do. Humility, being humble, character traits that parents can really help their children. Do you know, Sarah, one of my most requested workshops is So You Think Your Child's a Bully? I have so
Mhm.
many parents who know their child is like, oh, I got a problem here. I'm getting calls. I just don't know what to do. I'm seeing my child bullying their sibling. I'm seeing my child acting out in ways that we've got some serious character development traits we need to work on. And we're seeing it so much younger. I think most parents think bullying starts in middle school. Do you know we see 2 to 5-year-olds now dealing with serious bullying that we would expect in fourth, fifth grade? And
Mm.
fourth grade is the new middle school is legitimately a thing. Whatever you think of middle schools are doing, kids are doing, they're doing by 9 years old. And so having these conversations when it breaks down into cyberbullying and cyber mobbing and gaming bullying and how it starts to work its way into social media, we as parents are really, I think one of the biggest issues we're struggling with in relationships, whether you're a parent or in relationships, is many of us were not helped in this area. This wasn't something that our parents really necessarily a lot of times helped us through understanding bullying. And if there was bullying, how do you resolve it? You compact that with what's going on the last 10 years with social media, where parents are already like, I don't even know the words my kids are using. They got flaming and love bombing and posing, all these things. I don't even know what those are. How do I help them work through it? We're already behind the 8 ball in talking about this conversation. And then you compact it with all of these other things online, and it sets our kids up for a difficult situation, because I have a heart for both. Our kids who are really struggling and are the bullies, they need a lot of help from us, and we can really work with them on empathy, some new skills, some boundaries. Sometimes it is that extra hugs. They need to feel confident. But our
Mhm.
kids on the other side, they are so much more susceptible for even being sex trafficked online, because people, they're an easy prey. They're hurting, they're vulnerable, and somebody slips in and starts grooming them in the conversation of how mature they are, how great they are, how amazing they are. You can see how quickly that conversation goes when someone is hurting and broken, how it can really slide, because there's a lot of shame and pain that goes with bullying.
Mhm.
90% of kids don't tell their parents, and 70% never tell anyone. Guys, hear that. They never tell anyone. They sit in shame. They sit in pain. They don't know how to process their anger and their emotion. And now that we have children as young as 10 who are taking their lives, like the second leading cause of death in 10-year-olds is suicide, we have a compounded problem, which is why I think the conversations need to start so much earlier in the basic skills, right? Of even teaching our kids what really is bullying, not just throwing it around. I almost feel, Sarah, like it needs a new term. Like bullying doesn't, like it's, he bullied me, she bullied me, they're bullying me. It's almost like it needs a new term so that we got serious about it. But if people know what it is, then we can help our children and we can help our families and within our units and with siblings and parents, wherever that is. If we can put the vocabulary to the emotion, we know how to ask for help. And so many times people are afraid to do that for the judgment. And I will tell you, as a mom, I made a lot of mistakes, guys. When my son was 12 years old and came to me dealing with bullying, I actually almost lost him to suicide due to horrific bullying, which is why I left the corporate world and I do the work I do today. I went to the school, I asked for help. I was giving all the advice I knew, but the reality was there was a huge disconnect. And my son felt a lot of shame, a lot of embarrassment, a lot of he should be able to handle this on his own. He never felt safe at all. He was going to school, dealing with bullying. He was a bright child, a child that could speak 3 languages by the time he was 5, yet struggled with dyslexia and ADHD and was in classes that he was constantly feeling like he was never enough. He spent 80% of his day in school focusing on what he didn't do well, right? And then you compound that, this peer pressure, coming home, being cyberbullied, dealing with it and gaining bullying, a 24-hour cycle of going to bed with messages bombarding you that you are worthless. You are useless. We wish you wouldn't be in school tomorrow. Maybe he'll kill himself before he gets there. And you wake up to that on your mind. We as adults know how important it is to watch our minds, but our kids need some boundaries and structure. They need help with that. And when we don't create a place like what I did when he came and told me, and my thoughts were, and this is hard to talk about because my first response was wondering if he did something, sort of victim blaming. Did you do something? Is there something that maybe caused it? Because I thought of it as conflict. I'm trying to uncover more information, right? I'm trying to unpack this more to figure out if my son has done something to really cause this problem. When really that information he was giving me, I should have treated that like it was the most valuable Bitcoin, the most valuable gold, the most precious information he could have given me, because he was sharing with me his heart and his pain. It could have been the information to save his life. And instead I judged him. And I think as parents, sometimes we really have to be careful with our words. And when our kids share information with us and we've created space to listen to them, right? We talk to them about bullying, we talk to them about conflict, and we share with them how they can really come to us if they ever feel unsafe. When they do that, we need to honor that they're sharing a part of their pain with us. And so for parents out there, I would encourage you, as we started this conversation today, Sarah, if your child's coming to you and sharing that with you, take a deep breath and pause, right? And then open space by just saying, wow, that must be really hard. Would you tell me more? And learn to sit with them in that pain. It's hard as a parent. The tsunami can be inside happening. You can feel like mama bear to your spouse. If they come to share with you their pain and they're dealing with a situation with workplace bullying, it can be really hard. But listen and don't judge, because there's already so much shame that comes with not being able to handle it and ask for help. And so I would encourage parents to really put that phone down and honor your child or your spouse or your friend and listen, because adults are dealing with bullying at high rates. I don't think people realize cyberbullying is not really a teen issue. It's a mid-20s issue. And so after kids launch in their lives, that's the major time that we deal with cyberbullying. Your kids launched, your sisters, your family, your friends, they need your help during this time, because it picks away and it eats away at our egos. It eats away at our self-worth. It eats away at our confidence of who we are, and then starts to make us question so many other things. We start to believe what we're told.
How do you start that process? Because our common answer is, oh, just go tell the school. Oh, just go tell the person, right? And as a society, we are pretty unequipped to handle and manage this. We're not handling it that well.
Yes.
So what steps from your research now do you know that should be happening if a child is bullied?
Very first thing is document, 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 document. If you hear nothing else from me, document. I actually teach a lot of parent workshops on this, and we have them work through writing down everything that's happening. You guys need to keep messages. You need to keep text messages. You need to keep screenshots. Prepare your children in advance for what they're going to do if it happens, right? You're going to want to record if you can, depending on your state laws. I mean, things get a little complicated there, but you want to keep documents and write down who was there, what happened. And we want to use the words, right? You talked about, well, I want to make sure we use the words that are appropriate.
Yes.
When we have things that are written out and we're going to a school and we come to an approach of my child is being bullied, it may be my child has been assaulted. Here's what happens. Here's the documentation. And we actually walk parents through how to put the school on notification, what your rights are, what you need to do, and what expectations do you have for follow-up. Because the first thing should always be the child's safety. And for us, when we approached the school, my child's life was put in more danger when they approached the bully. They came at him and said, if you ever say anything again, we'll kill you. And it pushed him into a place of fear, right? And that happens a lot. It's retaliation bullying.
Well,
and it keeps people in quiet, right? And
yeah.
Or they'll make up lies against him. Or for those of us who understand narcissism really well, people come up with a Darvo response. They'll deny and they'll reverse it and they'll attack the victim themselves. And so parents, the first thing I really would encourage you to do before you even kick off your school years, because we're getting kids back anywhere you are in life, talk to your children about bullying, what it is, what it's not, and that you are there to help them. I also really encourage you before you're in crisis to go back to the old-fashioned code words with your kids. I know many of us grew up, we had a code word before we got in a car with somebody, right? If your kid calls you from the nurse's office, or your kid calls you from an appointment, or they text you your code word with them, that means I am not safe. I need you. I may not be able to communicate everything that I need to communicate to you now, but I'm not feeling safe and I need you. And when you can empower your children to give you that information, you can really open up a safe place that you'll be there for them. And so if you have that ahead of time and your child's struggling and they tell you, you can start listening, recording, documenting, writing it down. Kids that do workshops and families of those, we actually have a bead tracking system. We use kind of like a necklace. Each one has different colors. And we have the kids identify, it was a good day, right? It was a green day. We have our 5 different colors. And if they were assaulted or their safety was in, we have colors that identify that. And we also use colors to identify, I ask for help, white, because a lot of times we can see patterns. We can see, hey, every 3rd day we're having this exact problem. Sometimes we're too close to the issue to really see the patterns. But when we write it down, when we track it out, when we visualize it, we can start to see how to help our kids. Sometimes we also have to take steps forward, a little bit of step forward in walking our kids through taking some maybe steps back online when we need to for our mental health and our safety. And that can be hard conversations with teens because they tend to be very protective of their things. But if we can walk them through, hey, engaging in this with this person right now is really an issue. So talking them through that, helping them understand why we might need to walk away from things, and then creating things outside of just that online environment and where they are that create joy. It's important. So as I mentioned, we talk about the documenting, writing it down, and then helping our kids learn to empower themselves, empower them with their own words and vocabulary. And how do they then take care of their own mental health when they're being hit by these things? Because it does impact our mental health. It's a huge hit to us physically sometimes and mentally. And so we walk kids through how do they keep their mental health intact when they're being attacked online, when they're dealing with a bully in their lives. How do they do that in a way that really honors who they are and how they were created to be for their purpose?
So that's really different than the advice of, well, if someone's bullying you, you better hit them so they know who's boss.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I will say I'm not a fan of violence, but
Mhm.
but research will show, I want to tread lightly in this, but bullies don't want to fight.
Sure.
Right. So when you fight back, that's because they're going to move on to somebody else. So immediate feedback to a bully can be a good thing in other forms, but I'm not out there encouraging everybody to take the hit back, because in today's world that can put your kid in a lot of legal trouble and different things.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
But
so let's say you have a fourth grader,
I'm sorry, you had a what?
A fourth grader.
A fourth grade, okay.
Because you talk about fourth grade being the new.
Yep.
So you have a fourth grader and somebody says, you're ugly, you're mean. I hope that your pants fall down, you pee on yourself today. I'm trying to think of what fourth graders. It's like, it's going to be different than an eighth grade bullying or cyberbullying thing. So, start from the beginning. You talked about having a response for them, and sometimes an immediate response to a bully is what's appropriate. So if someone thinks they're being bullied, or you're trying to prepare your kids for middle school, for fourth and fifth grade, what do you mean by some of those immediate feedback to the bully? What are some things we can say?
So I want to back up just one step for our parents, because that's a big part of it. But if we can help prepare our kids before that step, it can really be helpful. So number one, when we're talking to our kids about helping lessen the target, I want our kids to understand it is never your fault. It is never your fault you're being bullied, but there are things we can do to help make ourselves less of a bully. So let's start there, and then I'll give you some ideas for it, because that's important. Our kids, so Sarah, you and I as women, we know the importance of walking from a grocery store at night with our head ups and our shoulders up and our keys, right? We're walking directly to the car because we don't want to be a victim, right? Because we know from research that a criminal can see a parking lot and know instantly who they're going to pick as a target. Our bullies are the same way. They are reading your body language. They're reading your social emotional cues, all of those things. When we're preparing our kids, head up, shoulders up, walking with intention, right? Coming at it with directness. Full words of no from the diaphragm with firmness while we're saying that really communicate a lot to somebody without being verbal. So I want to start there, because when we prepare our kids with how they're walking with intention, how they're communicating confidence, the bullies won't look for those kids necessarily. They'll move on to another easier target. But our kids are normally, when school starts, within the first 3 weeks, the targets have been identified for the year, because they're easy to identify and kind of look in a room and tell you who's going to be the kids who are being picked on, because those are the kind of things bullies are looking for. It's really subtle. And so things we can teach our kids, right, of walking with intention. Let's say they're going out to recess and this is happening. If they are able to have a friend, one friend, which is why we talk so much about a bystander or upstander with them, and not be alone, that can lessen an attack greatly. Making sure that they do write that down and have the power of their words. And there are things you can work kids through, as of, sometimes dismissive of, like, seriously, with a very firm shoulders up, direct eye contact, like, you're not messing with me, can be very different than just sitting there with your head down and taking it, because it will keep coming at you, right? There's a lot of things we can do in teaching our children to respond with their body language and their words and the tone and how it's said. Also letting, and I do.
Just 1 second, because that's so important, because we typically think in terms of having to help our kids power over. And in my own work, I say, let's not bring the hammer unless a hammer is required. And, saying something like, well, that seems interesting, or, well, someone's had
dismissive, right? Dismissive, or seriously, like,
yeah, that can be so much more powerful. And when I talk about being toxic person proof, or you talk about, standing up to bullies, it doesn't always mean bringing the hammer.
It doesn't mean that kid turns around and launches them in the jaw.
Right. There are a whole spectrum of tools available to you, because if you're dealing with workplace bullying, you certainly cannot throw people into a jaw, or knock them in the jaw. And we're trying to prepare our kids for a lifetime and prepare ourselves for a lifetime, not just, hey, yeah, it's appropriate to hit somebody on the schoolyard, but then how are you going to manage that in a future work situation or a romantic bullying relationship?
Because 80% of bullying is not physical. Only 20% is physical. 80% of it is really that emotional, relational. It's that aspect. So I do think it's important when we're preparing our kids, we need to start back in the beginning And I talk to so many people, especially dads, who their first response is, my kid's being bullied, and they sign them up for martial arts. Like, there is no other conversation. It's we're teaching them to defend themselves. And I'm like, yes, I think that can be important, because there's so much you can learn about your body language and your tone and your confidence. But there's so many things we can do before we get there, right? I will tell you, if your child is dealing with bullying, having things like the code word, and if you've talked to the teacher about a concern that you're having, if your child can do something as simple as having a pen that they only would use for that, and they pick it up and put it on the left corner of their desk, if they can do that to notify to the teacher at lunch break, I need to have a conversation with you, I'm not feeling safe. There are things that even as teachers and as people in our environments that we can do to help a student who might be being bullied, who doesn't yet have the power or the strength or the confidence to stand up for themselves. So how many tools can we empower them with? Can we give them a little thing, a sticker, a red folder, something that they can just leave, that it's no other communication besides, I'm having a serious safety concern and I need help. Right?
I love that.
Those things.
It's again about learning to find tools to empower ourselves, because we just say, we'll just tell the teacher, well, then who do you
that's
tell?
Not that easy. If there are 30 kids in the classroom and you're telling the teacher, you're actually going to make yourself an easier target, because now, and I do want to just kind of mention this real carefully. Our kids with special needs, I have a son on the spectrum who we actually ended up homeschooling him a couple of years after my other son, because at 9 years old, I found him under the bed screaming, I'd rather die than go back another day. And he was having his face thrown in the urinals, but typical, what you consider third, fourth grade bullying, to the point I said, I'm not doing this again. Like, I've already been down this path. I'm not doing it again. And it took me 2 years to help that child walk through enough confidence. And now he's a published author. He speaks on invisible disabilities. He's just 13, but it took a long time, 2 years of hard pain, to get him that he would even leave our home when other kids weren't in school. He was so terrified of other children because of that emotional damage that was done to him, that he sat in that fight or flight, always looking for somebody to harm him. It was hard for him to sit and even be in joy anymore, or just laugh, or just sit and be with me, because he was always looking for the pain. He was always looking for somebody to attack him. And he asked teachers, he asked authority, he asked people for help. He did what we teach, right? He went to counselors, and he was dismissed of, don't be a tattletale.
Yeah.
And so we have to watch our words. That's where we talk so much about our kids with special needs are at a much higher rate of being bullied, about 40% higher, whether it's from having food allergies or having a disability, whatever it is, they're at a much higher rate. And so can we empower them with words and tools so that they know what to do instead of sitting in victimhood? We should never expect somebody to handle this if they haven't been prepared. We don't toss our kids the keys at 16 and say, go get them. They have to have the tools to know how to even articulate the words and the pain that's happening to them. They don't know what assault is. Mm-hmm. They don't understand verbal abuse, right? They don't understand what it is. They know how they feel. And so as parents, not only do we have an important job of teaching them these tools, we have an important role of helping them work through these emotions. On that other side, not dismissing them of, well, everybody deals with this. It's just a part of school, being a kid. Parents, I want you to hear me. 1 in 6 girls will be sexually assaulted as a child, and 1 in 4 boys. That does not make it a normal part of childhood development. It doesn't. At least a third of our kids are dealing with bullying, at least a third. That is abuse. It's one of the largest forms of child abuse we do not talk about. We dismiss them. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Deal with it. Oh, everything will work out. They don't have the tools. And if we don't give them to them then, they don't know how to deal with it as adults. Mm-hmm. Which is why I work with so many adults who are struggling to kind of reconcile with their bullies of the past. PTSD and bullying is serious. Many people can remember to this day the smells, the sound, the exact person's name, what they were wearing, everything about them as they were being bullied. And it still impacts them in today's world. And it holds them back from many situations.
And you said something too. There's a idea that I'll just move geography, right? And in my situation, people move relationships, right? So they're like, okay, I was basically bullied in this romantic relationship, so I'm going to move to this relationship. And the statistics around that about getting into another toxic relationship are very terrifying.
Well, yeah, same with our bullying. Yeah.
Yeah, and so absolutely, because it's the same conversation. And that
Yes.
was, I really want people to hear that it's the same conversation, because if someone's listening right now and it's like, oh, it's terrible, my son is being bullied in third grade, I also want them to hear it's terrible that your son is watching you be bullied at home.
Right. And so I will say, for parents who are dealing with bullying, there is a thing that you will, many times, I know my youngest son did this. He was bullied so bad, he actually became the bully for a while. He started retaliating and putting up these big walls of, I'm going to hurt you before you hurt me. I can't take any more pain. And it was easier to push off this persona, like I'm the big bad kid, so that no one will want to come to me. Right. If
Mm-hmm.
you have kids like that, guys, lean in. If you have family members like that, they are hard to love in the moment. But if you can just lean into that pain with them, it's easy to help them rehabilitate and process through that. They just need to be loved. They need to be loved in that moment and taught some new skills and shown how that pain is causing to others. It is very different than somebody who is a narcissist who's wanting to inflict pain and power and things on other people. So if you have somebody in your life who is bullying, just take a little bit of peek behind the curtain, because sometimes our intention, right? Know the why, know the
Yeah.
why.
Well, if I talk about the little in Sound of Music, it's let's start at the very beginning, a very good place to start. And we forget, like we put, we don't want to do the work of discernment because it is work. And so we just like want to quickly throw things into buckets like bad, good, evil, not this, that. And excuse me. And then when we've decided someone is in a bucket, we just use all our energy to keep them in that same bucket rather than moving them to a different bucket.
Right. And how many of our kids or family members or people we know have we labeled in our lives and they stay in that? I see so many kids labeled early in that kindergarten, first grade year, that it's written in their files as them being difficult or a challenging child. They begin to believe that's who they are. I want you to think about that as adults, how much power we have over what we're speaking into kids. The first thing we do, any of the children we work with when we're doing trauma and healing workshops, is just showing them that they're created uniquely and beautifully, right? We're going to help find that beauty and joy and use passion projects or entrepreneurship or something to start teaching them joy and excitement, something they can feel proud of themselves again. Because many times that's been ripped away young and they think they are nothing other than a bully because that's what they've been told their whole life. And bad and mean. They start to identify those words of themselves. How does anybody get out of that if that's what they're told they are? You start to believe it, right? And so I think it's really important that we just speak truth and light and love where we can.
And if you have kids or if there's someone in your life, you're trying to discern the difference. You're trying to go back to the beginning. Because we talked about it, overly inflated self-esteem that allows us to control, create someone to want to control others. Then you have a personality who maybe they were hurt. And so they're trying to develop a shell around them to keep others out. Like what is your differentiation if I'm seeing a bully? And maybe it's I deal with a lot of people whose children are bullies at this point. I mean, they're 20, adults, they're punching holes in their parents' walls. I mean, it's just really a scary situation. Where do you differentiate? Maybe there's an overinflated ego, maybe not 20, we'll go back to 13. Overinflated ego that involves boundaries, or the other where we're probably hurt.
So I think that's kind of hard to just guess at, right? Like just a checklist.
Mm-hmm.
But really it depends. If you have a relationship with somebody, are you able to go back to the beginning and see where the behavior started? Is this a child who came out of the womb ready to fight? Like, right? We have kids in our life who are like strong-willed, ready to go, just intentionally going at it. Or was there an incident that you started to see a major shift? For example, my 12-year-old was happy and joyful. Everything was fine until that moment. It was a massive shift in his life. And we have now spent 6 years working through that. And I think it's something he's going to carry for life. And unfortunately, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but a big part of your development in childhood is a part of who you are. Right. So is there a piece of that? And either way, don't we all, I mean, unless we're dealing with somebody who's a complete psychopath, which, that's a whole other category. don't we all want to feel loved and accepted and just met where we are and heard? And I think a lot of people today, at least a lot of the bullies I deal with in our bullying workshops, they always come at me with this strong persona. I'm like, oh, please, I went to Baltimore County Public Schools. Let's do this. Like they come at you with this intensity. But as soon as you can sit and give them space that I'm actually here to listen, there's no judgment. I'm just here. Like they do tend to relax. My biggest bullies that scare me are the ones when they're confronted, they start denying, reversing, attacking, manipulating. That's a very different bully that we have to watch versus ones who are willing to take even some level of accountability, some level of willing to work through it. Does that make sense? I don't know that I could really just give you a checklist, but a very different type of personality to work with.
One is described as more cunning. It's like, I think you're just making that up. I don't remember hitting you. I think you did it yourself. I think you actually fell, didn't you? You're always so clumsy, right? It's much more cunning.
Yes. Very deceitful and manipulative and cunning. Yes.
Yeah.
And the other is just sometimes an inability to have impulse control. There's a lack of impulse control. There's a lack of empathy. There's a lack of self-confidence and being able to just feel any sense of direction. I actually find a lot of those kids, teens, and adults work really well in life coaching because they can start to make small changes. It's like we have to, for those families, kids, people, I find that they need 10 wins before we can tackle one tough thing. Even though we're there to deal with bullying, I need to give them 10 great wins somewhere in life that they feel good. And then we can talk about, hey, wow, this has been so amazing. You've had all of these great strides. I am so proud of you. I was talking to your brother the other day, and they're really hurting by some of the things you said. Could you maybe share with me why you said those things? But I can't even have that conversation until I've gotten that person to 10 wins of some confidence that they feel okay about themselves to even scratch the surface. And so it's just a different approach, right? Instead of just jumping into the deep end. That's why I tend to like to use entrepreneurship, passion projects, things they care about and love, get them working on some other things to get the mind focused on, right? Engaging, like all the things, stay mentally healthy, work on all of these things, and then we'll start approaching them slowly. And I find they just tend to open up and have much more success than trying to dive into the deep end. Now,
that's awesome. Yeah.
It's just a little different, but it does work. I find it a lot easier in the long term.
Yeah. Well, Candice, this has been wonderful. Tell people where they can find more about you.
Thank you, Sarah. I am at Bullied, Broken, Redeemed. We have probably 6 different books. We're everywhere on Amazon or on our stores. I also teach classes in leadership development skills online, which are all self-paced for parents and teens and leaders, so that we can teach you all of these skills in the privacy of your home so that you know how to help your child through all these issues. And we also tackle social media addiction, which is a big one in today's world. Yeah.
Yes, I did my master's thesis on screen time in children. So
could you and I have some conversations, right? Oh my.
Well, I was reading in Bill Eddy's book recently. He talked about, and other people have said this, but that they're talking about personality disorders being on the rise. And that's a really important note. This is a conversation that we are on the cusp. I was describing it to my team yesterday. I was like, there's this like iceberg coming when and we're like here on the Titanic. We hadn't even hit, we can kind of see the iceberg, and we're talking about narcissism or whatever. We hadn't even got close to hitting it.
And when we talk about it, how many of us in our businesses, let's just talk about as entrepreneurs or business, how many of us get hit with negative feedback online and we don't even know how to process that sometimes without spiraling? How do we take the hits from people when we're out there, whether it's in our businesses, whether it's from family members, or whether we posted something, Lordy mercy, about health or whatever we want to talk about? The negative feedback we get really can impact people deeply, like can sit on it, create high anxiety. How do we even take those small things that aren't big in the end of the world, but spiral people to the point that they're kind of in crisis over it? They don't even know how to, they walk away, they quit, they stop doing what they're doing because they don't know how to deal with the negative feedback. And it's something we really need to teach our kids. because they're
Yeah.
going to live in a world of it. And so how do we do that? And that can be a conversation for another day, but how do we
Yeah.
do that and come out mentally healthy and still feel empowered when we are dealing with those online bullies and trolls and people who just don't really have our best heart? Right?
Yeah. So why don't you, if you were able to broadcast yourself to the whole world, you get to give your own speech that everyone has to listen to, right? What do you wish the whole world knew about bullying that most people are currently missing?
The first thing I would say is that bullying is not a school issue. It is a cultural issue. We need to stop thinking of it as a school issue. We need to look at how it's impacting our workplace, how it's impacting politics, how it's impacting our online communities, and how can we as leaders effectively put policies and walk alongside people in pain. We as leaders, yourself, I mean, we're going to have people entrusted to us in our teams and our care and our families when they're dealing with these issues or we see it. How do we step in and effectively make change so that we don't lose whole groups of people who are really phenomenal at their jobs? Or how do we help impact kids? I think the biggest conversation we've missed in bullying has been where we started. We have to empower parents again. We need to take this conversation out of the teachers and the schools to the communities, right? If we brought parents into the conversation, we brought employers and workplace, and we empowered people of how to handle conflict better and how to actually handle bullying and know what to do, we would all be equipped in at least the basics of knowing where to start so we can make a change. I do not see the direction we are going as turning this Titanic around. And with mental health, no, it's really bad. And with mental health on the rise, and how many parents, my heart breaks for families because they're just almost apathetic to it. They're like, listen, I can't do it all. I'm the principal, I'm the counselor, I'm the teacher, I'm trying to work, I'm trying to put things on the table. Like, it is so much right now. I can't even deal with it. Like, my kid's alive, that's the best I can do. And our kids and our communities are struggling. Can we open places that aren't attached to the school? Can we truly start talking about mental health communities, right? Can we have facilities that really made an impact in our communities from true education for parents? And I know a lot of people don't like this, but we have kind of a bullying crisis in our country because we have a parenting crisis in our country.
And
Ouch.
I agree. And I want to
Ouch.
say, if a parent is being bullied in their life, they
Yes.
have less energy and be more apathetic to what's going on with their kids. One, because bullying is normal.
Right. They
And
grew up
two,
with it.
they grew up with it, or they're experiencing it now,
Mhm.
or they're experiencing it in real life.
And people make excuses many times for the bullies in their lives because that bully is manipulating and controlling other people. No one wants to deal with them. So that would be my advice. Let's stop talking about it as a school issue and start looking at it as our whole culture. Because as we said, geography alone won't fix it. You go from here to university to workplace. If we don't have the tools, or in our marriages, wherever we are, it's going to continue to kind of be an issue in our lives until we learn the tools to deal with it.
Candice, thank you so much for bringing us some of those tools to deal with it today, for helping us on our journey to becoming toxic person proof.